I just sent it.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much again for joining us, the Latinx Education Collaborative, with another amazing edition of Ask an Educator. We are so excited today because today we have Alfredo Crossman-Chavez Jr. on with us, and we cannot wait for him to share what he has to say. So get ready.
Susana, how are you doing today?
I thought you were doing the little song thing.
Oh, you know what? We haven't tried that in a while. You know what?
Okay.
Just because, let's see. Can we do? I don't even have it up here. You know what?
Okay.
There was a whole introduction that was going to happen. Boom! It happened. All right.
It happened. Hi guys, welcome back. Edgar, I am well. How are you?
It's been a crazy week. But I'm glad to be in community with everyone, and I'm glad to be here and to hold this space today. So, thank you. Alfredo,
Yeah, go ahead.
You've talked to us before, haven't you, in the past, man? Right? You were one on our podcast when we had a podcast way in the day, and then COVID-19 happened, and we have a podcast no more. For those of us that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Afredo Crossman-Chavez Jr. I am a founding athletic director and founding PE teacher and founding head basketball coach at Kip Corazon Academy, which is in Southgate, California. I am Afro-Latinx. I am half African-American. I'm half Panamanian American as well.
That's awesome. And are you currently in California?
I am currently in Rochester, New York, a small city, which is in upstate New York. So I took a little break from the palm trees, the sun, to come back and to spend time with some family, ground myself. And I'm also trying to start up some organizations here, actually, especially with everything going on right now.
That's awesome. What kind of organizations are you trying to start?
So one, I'm going to start up a Black Lives Matter run. My intentions behind it is to collaborate with the actual original Black Lives Matter. And I want to get it to be a global run where everyone goes out on a certain specific day. And we're going to either run, walk, or jog a 1K or a 3K. We are going to create shirts that are going to be donated. The funds for the shirts are going to be donated to the Black Lives Matter organization. Hopefully it can go to the bail money for the actual protesters. And second, I also want to have speakers at these, like virtually in different cities, who are able to talk to the people, because I feel like I'm a speak for my I statement, that I'm very vocal when it comes to police brutality, anti-Blackness, and so much more. But when it comes to actually knowing the voting stance and who to vote for and who should we actually invest our time in and listening, that's the part where I feel like me as myself and some of my community needs that information communicated to them. And so how can we bring these speakers who can make that connection, like you both spoke about that bridge? So I know that the next action step that I'm taking is that I'm going to get out to register. I'm going to vote. I'm going to advocate and speak my voice as well. And the last thing is I want to start a NAACP chapter here in Rochester, New York. There's 52 chapters in New York State. Rochester, New York is the only city without a chapter. There's a man, I can't recall his name at the moment. He wanted to start a chapter up. There was a lot of inconsistency happening with it. And so his statement was, if I can just get people to commit, to get into the membership, to want to work on change, then he will make that happen. So I'm going to collaborate with him during my time here in upstate New York.
Dude, that is you are incredibly busy, and it's only the beginning of, I guess, summer. So actually, walk us back, man. Walk us back. I'd love to get to the point. Let's talk a little bit about how you became an educator. Like, walk us through that journey. How did it all start for you?
Well, I'll go back to when I was in community college, and I was a paraprofessional. And at the time, I was doing that work when I used to come home during the summer, and I would just work with students who were paraplegic, Down syndrome, who also needed one-on-one, like, extra assistance, like help. And so how I looked at it at first was just just again, being busy during, that last month before summer break. And I'm not gonna lie, it was one day where I had a breakthrough where a lady was explaining to me as I was watching one of my students, what these kids go through. I believe she told me that a student that has Down syndrome goes through so many heart surgeries that it wasn't even funny. And I sat there and it just sat with me for so long. And I said, I want to work in education. I don't know how I want to work in education, but I want to be the spark for these students. And because the lady told me how people give up on them, people just write them off. And I was like, okay, cool. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I'm just going to kind of fast forward it. After college of getting my bachelor's degree, I ended up working as a group leader for after school program. My site director told me, hey, listen, I think you need to get into education. And I started to teacher sub. And long story short, I became a long-term physical education teacher. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to teach math. I'm not going to teach science. Those aren't really my strong points, but I think I can teach PE and bring in my passion for education through that. And so that kind of just got me into working as a PE teacher.
What age level do you work with right now?
I'm currently working with 4th, 5th, and 6th. Next year, we will actually be 5th, 6th, and 7th. We'll be actually dropping the 4th grade. And it'll be the 4th grade will just stay with the lower school. So there's a Kip Corazon upper and a Kip Corazon lower. The lower is K through 4 and the upper is 5th through 8th.
Nice. So that rough little patch of age right there, they're getting right in. I was a 6th grade teacher, so I know about that little age. It's a little strange,
I'll tell you this, and I never thought would work with that age. I used to work with 7th and 8th grade, and I remember Mr. Chevalier, who's my school leader, he said, hey, we're only gonna have 5th graders. It's gonna be our founding year. I said, cool, all right, never worked with them before, I'm fine. He calls me up and says, hey, listen, we don't have enough 5th graders to start our own school, so we got to bring on 4th graders. I got so quiet on the phone. I said, 4th graders? He's like, yeah. All right, Mario, I got you. Cool. And so at first it was rough because I tried to do certain things where, why don't you get it? Like, come on, you got to dribble this basketball. These are the steps. And I that first year of teaching with Kip, I got so much feedback that I learned that you have to break things down for kids. And a lot of times, if you're not an educator, you don't really get it. But when you go into a classroom, you just can't word vomit and then say, all right, take this test. I want you to write down everything I just told you. And you're like, what? Mm-hmm. And you're like, what? Like checking for understanding, right? Like step by step, partner talk, right? Okay, tell your partner what you heard. So I think it was a huge learning curve for me as an adult because I always assume that you understand like what I'm trying to tell you. And kids teach you that there are so many ways to teach and so many ways people interpret things that you need to be flexible.
I'm interested. So what did pre-COVID look like for you? So tell me about the day before things changed. What was that day like for you?
Okay, so I like to paint pictures. So we got a Nike grant earlier in the year. A friend of mine, her name's Savannah. She used to work for Nike. A huge shout out to her. She's a student at UCLA right now, getting her master's. And we got a Nike grant. Nike sends us an email the week before and says, hey, we want you to bring 6 students, 5 staff members. We're going to acknowledge you all at a banquet because of what you're doing with your athletic program, right? I mean, come on, I'm a small kid from Rochester. Nike's emailing me. I'm telling kids off of the basketball team because we just finished our founding season. Like, I'm hyped. I'm telling like staff members, hey, you're going to come. Nike's like, here's 20% off. So I'm hyped. And the day that COVID hits, I'm not going to lie. I walk up to my assistant school leader, Dr. Graham. I said, hey, listen, I'm still going to that banquet. All right. I'm not going to let the students go. I'm going to go. She's like, no, you're not. I I said, Dr. Graham, they're still having it. Come on, this is Nike. I want to keep this partnership alive. I want to see if they can do some future partnerships. Because I called them and they said they're still having it. So I didn't want to do a no call, no show. Literally, the chief of Nike calls me and says, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. We're not having the banquet anymore. We are more, we are just more focused on the safety of our students, our staff members. And I said, ooh, thank you. Because I told him, I was like, if you were still having it, I didn't want you to think we weren't going to show up, because like that's like a future partnership. But later on that day, our school leader was very transparent. He had a meeting with all the teachers, just kind of like being honest with us about like the end results of like COVID, what's going to end up happening, and how he think things will look. And I think that was much appreciated. I got scared because I didn't know how PE would look for me, because virtually it's like PE is so in person and physical and outdoors. So when he talked about COVID, it was like, whoa, like teachers were putting out packets and, you know, packets here and packets here, and everybody, and I'm just sitting here like, what am I supposed to do? Right. You know, so it was very crazy and hectic. We had closing conversations. Our administration staff kept us in the loop as details kept coming in. And it was really sad that last day seeing kids actually hug each other because they felt that this could be the last time I see you in person for a very long period of time. So it was a very emotional day.
So you guys got word. So let me paint our picture of what and because I'm like, dang, you guys got word. So our spring break was happening the next week, and so we were told on Thursday night that there was no school on Friday. So Thursday night, we're thinking we're going back to school on Friday, and like, okay, well, maybe we might not come back, God, you know? And it just abruptly was like, we didn't get to say bye. The kids didn't know. We didn't know. We thought like maybe we'll come back after spring break. During spring break, then they canceled for long term. So I'm glad that you guys got like a little bit of closure, you know, as sad as that was and emotional, you know, for us, it was like, dang, I'm not going to see you for the rest of the year, or possibly for the rest of the year. And then it turned out being the rest of the year. So I'm glad you guys got that closure for sure.
Spring break happened 2 weeks. So COVID hit for us March 14th was the last day. And the end of March was when spring break was going to start for us. So they told people we would come back the week before spring break. That was the goal. And then everything is like, boom.
Jeez. I want to bring some into the community. We got some folks watching, so I want to acknowledge them. We got Sugar Daddy saying, hey, understand. Love that. Love that nickname. That cracks me up. Hurston, what's up, Hurston? You have to break things down for adults too. Man, that's a message right now. That's a message.
Thank you.
So actually something that, you know, we are lucky to be, I'm lucky to be your friend on Facebook. And so I catch up with a lot of the stuff that you're doing for your students. You actually spoke at Evolucion along with our board member, Roberto Diaz, on equity and that kind of stuff. And it was a phenomenal session. Talk a little bit about like what you've been doing and how you've been utilizing like your apps and in terms of getting kids hype about physical education, getting them active during these periods. Because I've had a lot of fun just watching you from afar. I can't imagine like what your students are like experiencing as well.
But first of all, I just got to say thank you, Edgar, for bringing that up, because with all the midst of things going on, it's like all that is like so far in the past, but it literally was just going on. So when COVID happened, there was a coach named Coach Jason. He works for Kip Comienza. He started a live stream page on his Instagram, and my school leader screenshotted it and sent it to me. He said, hey, I think this would be super dope. Now, before that, I told my school, I was like, hey, I want to do something really cool in the community, like really cool virtually. to get kids involved. He was like, man, I know you're going to do it. By all means, like, let me know what you need support. Long story short, Coach Jason has a live stream. He has me on there as a special guest, and we're doing an exercise, right? And I was like, yo, I like this. Like, this can go somewhere right now, right? Shout out to him. He was like the fire that sparked it. He ended up not being able to continue it for just reasons with his school and his administration staff. My school leader said, hey, you get parents to use their Instagram if they want to tune in for the kids and getting the okay from them, and we're perfectly good. So I'm a big person. Like, it always starts off as this small idea and it just like grows. So the first thing I did was Tabata Thursdays. Tabata Thursdays is a high intensity workout with no rest. I have a special guest from our school. His name is Mr. Shen. Huge shout out to Mr. Shen. It's a good friend of mine, and he is a workout junkie. He loves to work out. He does CrossFit. So I had him on there. We're doing the live stream Tabata. We had about, I want to say 40 families just tuning in. So I said, hold on, this, you know what? PE isn't just about working out. How can I grow this out? So I'm like sitting there, I started thinking about like a game show. And I'm like, okay, there's kids who love to do certain things, not just working out at PE. So how can I reach them too? I reach out to a dance teacher from another KIPP school, because I love to collaborate. I said, hey, can you teach dance on the live stream? She said, yeah, let's go. Boom. Hip Hop Fridays comes about. I said, okay, something else has to happen. I said, hold on, kids love challenging adults. Let's have Challenge Wednesdays come about. So I started to get like KIPPsters from other schools to come on and do exercise challenges. And at first it started off as like, let's see who can do the most push-ups. To like me, like, you know what, hold on, let's make this even more fun. We're going to do exercise bingo. Now I got like the twirling knob, and I'm picking bingo numbers, and a certain number means you got to do a certain exercise. And now with the challenge, that happens is if you lose, that you got to do something, funny. I've gotten a bucket of ice water dumped on me. I've gotten pied in the face. Another student had to dye his hair, right? I had to eat a raw onion. And these are just like funny things happening from these challenges, from burpee challenge to we had to do a popcorn push-up challenge where you had to like every push-up you did, you could grab one popcorn, put it in a bowl. So just like fun, engaging challenges. And then the newest one we did was Tuesday, which is Nutritionist Tuesdays. And so that's when I brought in, we all love to eat. So how can we make adjustments to these meals that our students are eating and consuming at home, but still making it enjoyable? And so I had a student on the live stream with me cooking banana oatmeal pancakes. Kids were like sending screenshots of like them cooking at home to the actual live stream. I had last month was AAPI, so Asian American Pacific Islander. And so I had teachers and staff members come about who identify as Asian American or Pacific Islander, cooking traditional dishes from their culture and explaining, when do we eat this dish? Why do we eat it? Explaining about their actual culture as well. And so the live stream just became something super dope. I would do promotional videos, flyers. I actually connected with someone in Nashville, Tennessee, who was an athletic director from KIPP. Shout out to him. But it was super dope. I loved it.
So you built out an entire business is what I'm hearing.
You know what? I have a question, because one of the things that has come up several times in our community has been student engagement, and how so many educators across the country are struggling with student engagement, either because it's hard to get a hold of them. There's the digital divide, kids don't have access to devices, to Wi-Fi. How have you remedied some of that, or how have your kids become creative and remedied some of that?
I think it's the relationship that you build before. We as a school, we take so much pride in constant conversations with not only the student, but the parents, the families, we always have families coming to the school, so such as parent nights. I think when you build that foundation, that is what makes it a little bit easier when it comes to this distance learning. I've struggled too. I mean, even though I've had the live stream going on, I've had my struggles as well, but not as much as others, because when I call my students or I ask them to do these things for me, like I had a parent and a daughter involved in Tabata Thursdays. And that was huge because that's a mom getting on there with her daughter, exercising with me. And this is motivating other parents and students to do the same thing. And so I think when you build that bond and that connection with your students, with your school, that even though distance learning is this huge hurdle, it's not that regular hurdle that runners are running over. It's like a huge one. It makes it a little bit easier to crawl over it because that prior relationship was built and it's a firm one. So I definitely appreciate my students who've been, I'll call them like, hey, I want you on the live stream. I got you, coach. You know, and some of them have been a little bit nervous, but they'll say like, I'll still do it for you. So
just quickly, again, always like to bring in the community. Jonna, thanks so much for joining us. That engaging their students can't be done without parents. It's something that I think that we've tried to reinforce, and actually what we've heard and and Susana's heard, and also kind of reinforces building the relationships ahead of time is so critical in general, right? My question is like, so let's assume, I'm doubtful this will happen, but let's assume that you get to go back to in-person in the fall. Do you keep some of these newer strategies of engagement flowing, or are you kind of just done with them?
So my assistant school leader, Dr. Graham and Mr. Chavidia, told me COVID made teachers better teachers, because this is something that my school leader referenced to, is that we're in a generation, in a time where technology is taking over. And we can look at it in a negative way, we can look at it in a positive way, but how can we use that to our advantage? And right now, with me being a PE teacher, the age of a PE teacher just motivating kids by rolling out certain equipment is over, right? There's so many applications on there and social media platforms that students are interested in and they use already. So what can I use to my actual advantage to motivate these actual students? And so I'm going to keep using that platform that I have, but now I want to actually have students take it over, right? So having highlights of like there's a thing called fitness gram push-ups, right? The fitness gram test. And this is where students have to do push-ups, curl-ups, a pacer test. And it's very negatively looked at, right? Because it's an intense test. Most of the time, people aren't prepared for it. How can I change that outlook on it and make it positive? Okay, one, I can shout students out on the social media platform, right? Two, I can have students actually take over the social media platform and they can be actually recording PE, right? Either during class or after school, right? They can have interviews with students. They can promote challenges on the actual social media platform. So it's not just my voice, right? Because we want our students to be our advocates. And so I told myself I can keep that platform because when the summer hits, I want kids to still be exercising. I want kids to still be eating correctly. And I also want kids to still have fun, right? Christmas, winter break, right? November break, February recess. We have a lot of times where other teachers are able to send home content, and I want PE to be looked at in that positive light, in that respected light, where administrators are like, okay, PE has this, right? And now it's like this expectation by not only like me, but like the parent as well, that, oh, you need to actually make sure you do your PE workouts as well too, like, because it's right here.
I love your enthusiasm for the work. And I think that that's something that inspires. I think too, I've seen it, and it's caught my attention. And so it's not just fun for your students. I think that it's also fun for engaging the community at large. And I think that is, I think, the power of social media in general, right? Like there are more people watching than you think there are sometimes. And so like, it's cool to see. And I wonder, my question would be like, how many people have you actually inspired outside of your own work that you don't even know about? Like, how have you improved others, you know, in this space? And so that's pretty cool, man. So I celebrate you and I congratulate you on that. Are you done with school, or like, are you still in class?
We are actually still going until next week. We have some award ceremonies. We actually just had a processing circle with what is happening in the world right now. So we had that with our 4th grade students, 5th grade, and 6th grade yesterday. And we're currently having processing circles with our staff members as well. So we're still working, still checking in with our students, which is very good. I think KIP makes it their business to stay in contact. And I think that's very good, just because kids need like that guidance, and we don't know what it looks like at home, you know, because I know growing up for me, I'm gonna speak from an I perspective, that my mom worked the A shift. She was a nurse, and my dad worked the B shift. So certain segments of time during the day, I was home by myself, you know, me and my brother. So that check-in that they're getting is, you know, like, oh man, somebody, you know, hello, yeah, hey, how you doing there, Mr. Coach C? Or, you know, yeah, I'm doing this at home. So we're ending June 12th. June 12th is our last day.
You mentioned processing circles. Obviously, we have to acknowledge George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so for me, what I'm interested in, like, what are your processing circles look like for the 4th through 6th graders versus what do your processing circles look like for the adults? And what are the conversations that maybe intertwine, and like, where are the differences in that?
So for a huge shout out to Miss Torres. She's our English teacher, grade level lead for 6th grade. She was the RJ coordinator for last year as well too. She held the circle for our 4th and 5th graders, and a huge shout out to Miss Mosito. She's our grade level lead for 5th grade, our ethics studies teacher, and she held the processing circle for 6th grade. It looked different. It didn't look much different between grade levels, and I want to say this because the first processing circle is just actually acknowledging what has happened and hearing our students. Because before you can actually teach, you have to know what they know and how they actually feel about everything. So yesterday, we showed the picture of George Floyd. We talked about what actually happened with all 4 police officers being there, what role did all 4 police officers play. We talked about the actual protests, and we went into the description of what is a protest, what is a riot, right? And we talked about, we asked questions such as, well, what have you seen on social media? How are you feeling? What are you struggling with, right? And those conversations look differently for everybody. Our 6th grade students, we have only a couple people voicing, and then more so writing comments as we are on a Google Hangout. For our 4th and 5th graders, we have more of them actually, I want to speak next, I want to speak next, and some people typing. And our students are very socially aware. They are so knowledgeable about what is happening. And two things that play a role is social media, which I'm going to say I look at in a very positive manner because it shows our students what's happening, but also it confuses us too. And so some students had struggles with, they didn't know if police were good or bad, right? Students were very angry and sad because what happened to George Floyd, and they were sad that that happened. Some people are struggling because they trust police, but how can we trust police if they're killing people? Some people are confused on the riots, like why are people actually going out and stealing? But also there's protesting happening. Like one student, he literally said, well, the protesting are happening because they've been protesting non-violently for such a long time that people are tired. I literally almost wanted to jump through the screen and like hug my student, you know? So that's how like the conversation went with our 4th and 5th and 6th graders. just the basic processing, just them talking as well. With our adults, they were also in the 4th and 5th and 6th grade processing circles with our students, and they voiced their opinion as well. A lot of us, I work at a predominantly Latinx school, and so a lot of our teachers are open and seeking to be more educated, like in this topic at hand. Black Lives Matter is a huge movement that has faced a lot of backlash, a lot of people against it, a lot of people wondering why are we just focusing on Black Lives Matter. And the school we work at is set up, Mario has set it up where we have these open dialogue conversations. So our first processing circle was everybody splitting up into different partners and having like that one-on-one conversation. And just those like surface levels questions. What have you seen? How does it make you feel? And then we're actually going to have another processing circle next week, which is going to talk about we're going to have like an affinity group with like our Black staff members. We're going to have a healing circle. We're going to have an action circle. And a person from each circle is actually going to have their smaller circle and dialogue, right? Because the real realization is that if some people have a different stance, could be at the moment, could be tomorrow, could be yesterday. And so we kind of want to have these small groups to be intentional so we can have these smaller conversations and then bring us back to a whole so we're actually aligned.
So you talked earlier about identifying as Afro-Latinx. Is that, I know that Afro-Latinx has come into the mainstream in the last probably 5 to maybe 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
What was identifying as Afro-Latinx? Has that been a process? Are you solidified? What did that look like for you? If you don't mind speaking on it.
No. I do. We spoke, me and Edgar spoke about it like in the podcast as well. So I love speaking about it. It hasn't been a struggle now, but before it was. I didn't know what to identify with. When I was back home in Rochester, New York, I was always looked at as that you're a Spanish kid, moving to North Carolina where I got my degree. Oh, you're Mexican. Moving to LA, you're Black. You're not actually Latin. You don't look Latin. I don't understand. Like, you're getting into this Lyft or Uber, and why is your name Alfredo? I'm confused. And so it's always been like this constant battle and tug and pull of like, who am I? Right? Because my dad had so much pride in being Panamanian, and I took that. But then when people told me I wasn't that, I kind of like that light dimmed. And so where I'm at now is that, again, I say this all the time, I'm still unpacking my identity, as a human being, as a person. But working at Kip Codestone Academy has done so many wonders for me because my school leader creates this space where you are who you are. Speak it, be proud of it, unpack it, because you can't be an educator and teach kids to advocate and be themselves if you're not yourself. And so we've had conversations in circles where I would talk about, I am Afro-Latinx, and this is the experience I felt being here in LA. And some of my students will be like, well, why are people telling you you're not Latin, Coach C? And I'm like, this is why. And my students are like, that's not okay. Or some of them have faced that because they're a darker skin tone, right? Because their hair.
I was gonna ask, like, have you had students who relate to that story?
Yep. A student was telling me they got into a Lyft or Uber, their mother was looked at, you're a darker skin color, and I don't believe that you're Mexican. And we even had a staff member who was experiencing those certain things. So I feel like right now I'm in a position where I have built my confidence up to advocate, to speak on a platform that I'm at, but now I can also bridge this gap, because there's this gap between Latinx and African Americans, right? And to be very specific, I want to be very intentional when I'm saying, and we have white Latinx individuals who have a lot of anti-Blackness in their community, which we are overlooking that's happening to Afro-Latinx individuals, right? Black Afro-Latinx individuals. And that has to be talked about and unpacked and really dealt with so we can come together, right, as one and stand together during like these movements such as the Black Lives Matter.
I never know if Edgar's getting ready to go or not.
I'm listening and I'm receiving and I'm processing because I think you know, that gap is real, right? And there's a lot of work to be done, and anti-Blackness is prevalent in our communities. It's prevalent in my family. It's prevalent in, well, I mean, we talk about this, right? And we've seen a lot of conversations. Susana and I have had a lot of conversations from an organizational perspective around, like, one, how do we show solidarity? Two, how do we build trust? You know, three, how do we work through all these other narratives that are vying, and, like, you know, how do we just stand up for what's right, period? And regardless of what we perceive as a cost, regardless of what, you know, like how uncomfortable it may be, because at the end of the day, Black people are dying. And, you know, that to me is like I process this because, like, I think about, from my perspective, like, how do we also build those bridges and educate and inform our community? How do we support our educators as they become anti-racist in their teaching? What kind of stuff should we be doing in that way? Because we have a responsibility to that, right? And so, anyways, it's me processing.
Yeah, I mean, because we've had conversations about how Edgar and I are both light-skinned Latinx, right? And so we hold privileges in a societal standpoint that a dark-skinned or Afro-Latino doesn't hold, right? So we've started to have the conversation about, like, what are Latinx educators' responsibilities here that they're not realizing are their responsibility, right? And so we appreciate the work that you do, because having those and it sounds like the school that you teach at, because those very real conversations validate our students' fears and questions and insecurities, right? And help educate them in another way, right? As Afro-Latino, do you identify as a Black man, or just do you say Afro-Latino?
I always say Afro-Latinx because I don't want people to assume that I'm, like, taking a side during a specific time, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I know, I'm going to be honest, I know for sure as I navigate throughout the world, I am looked at as a Black man. And that is something that I acknowledge. Like, as I go through this world, people are going to perceive me. If I get put over by the cops, they're going to perceive me as a Black man. But I will always speak on being Afro-Latinx. Like, that is a part of me. That is who I am. So I try to stay as true as I can to that, because I don't want individuals to feel as if, like, I don't want to, let's excuse the individual. I don't want to feel for myself that I am choosing a side at a specific moment. And it may, and I'm going to be honest, and I spoke to a friend about this, it may happen, right? It's going to happen at some times where I'm like, oh, I'm a Black man, right? And that's something I need to be able to check in that moment, right? And tell myself I am Afro-Latinx, right? And speak on that. And he was a good friend of mine. His name's Mr. T. We had a conversation. He's biracial. He's Indian and white. And he was so honest, and just, he's such a dope individual. He was like, some days I might not like my Indian side, but, like, appreciate my white side. And some days I might not like my white side and appreciate my Indian side. And I just was listening to him being so authentic and so honest, because being mixed is tough, because it's a tug and pull at different moments, right? And different things trigger me that won't trigger just somebody who's Black. If I hear somebody make a racial slur that is geared towards Latinx or Hispanics, I get triggered. But for someone who might not be Latinx mixed with Black, it might not get them as mad, right? And so that's where, like, that's just one example of, like, when I'm mixed, it's just very different for me, because a lot of things affect me in a different way.
Mm-hmm. So what have you, in the last couple weeks, or perhaps since Black Lives Matter and Ferguson and all of that, what have you kind of accepted as your responsibility as an educator of kids of color? What have you kind of put into place or kind of exude on a day-to-day basis when you're in front of your students?
So the hard part is right now we're not teaching, because so we racked up our quarter grades, our quarter 3 grades, and currently students are really just working on like iReady math, iReady English, guided reading at home. And so I can honestly say right now, I've been just processing things. I've checked in with my students, right? But as for me putting things out in the air right now, I will say honestly right now, like I haven't done much from my student perspective because I've been so socially involved on my platform that I have. I think it's hard talking to students virtually too, because we all have to respect that they have parents at home. And you have to be very tricky with what you tell that actual student, right? Because even though you might believe this is correct and this is right, they still live at home with 2 parents or 3 parents or older siblings and cousins, aunt, uncles, whoever it may be, who has a different mindset than you, right? And so it's very kind of selective, the information we can share with kids and the different experiences they have. I have check-ins with some of my students, and some of them have been affected literally a lot from this. Some of them not as much, right? And it depends on the conversations that are happening at home. But I know for sure for me, as the what I've taken on is that I'm using my voice and speaking my opinion and speaking my truth. I've been on social media a lot. I've been making videos, adding to my story. I've done like a couple of IGTVs, and I think it's just my job to kind of like make my voice heard, even if it makes people uncomfortable. You know, I have to be prepared for that.
I mean, that's part of owning your identity, right? I think that is a lifetime journey, and I always remind folks it is not a destination. It's definitely a journey, and you know, I think hopefully, if you're doing the work, if you're addressing your own issues, if you know whatever that looks like, and however you navigate that, like the more comfortable you become with yourself, the more that you're going to just start speaking on what your beliefs are. And you know, stand by them. And I think that's a powerful statement, right? And owning your identity, whatever it is, you know, and besides of like social constructs or what society tells you it is, right? And so I think that's so important. Quickly, just to again bring in the community, youth and wisdom are not mutually exclusive. Young folks are brilliant, absolutely. Thanks, Harrison. He's shouting out Aggie Pride. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means.
Aggie Pride. I went to North Carolina A&T State University, so that's my Aggie Pride.
For those of you who understand that, there you go. Enjoy that moment. And Hurston says this is why isolating identity to color is so divisive. Ethnicity, nationality are antithetical color. This is also why I use the term perceived ethnic. And I also if I can speak to that though, like I think it's also important that we don't erase Black identity as well, and that we don't, you know, erase certain things, because we also have to create these uncomfortable. They're no longer uncomfortable for me. I'll say this: like I think they have to be had, and they're necessary to be had, because we're talking about systemic inequities. We're talking about racist systems, racist policies. We're talking about anti-Blackness. And we have to call that out and name it out, because otherwise we lose it under, you know, like we soften it. People of color. All of a sudden, like that allows us to navigate in a very different way than by just calling it out. And so I hear that and I receive that. And I also say, like, we have to educate and continue to create these spaces where we're calling it out, and we're also, you know, being prideful about it. And so I don't know your thoughts, and I could be wrong. I'm open to learning. I'm open to argue that point as well, because I also understand and recognize my privilege in these conversations.
You hit it on the knob. I think it's sometimes we try to soften the blow. And I was talking to my assistant school leader about that. And when we use certain terminology, right? Like just for instance, when we talk about George Floyd, like Some people will say like he was stopped from breathing or he was killed. No, he was murdered, right? Like being completely honest about it. And also you spoke into it a lot. I think what's happening right now is I see a lot of people who write and post and put people of color, and it's a trigger. I'm gonna be honest, it's a trigger because right now the focal point of this entire movement is Black lives, right? This is something that's being done to a particular race that we need to acknowledge that it's not people of color, because that goes into this goes into a whole umbrella, right? Like someone who's Filipino could be a person of color too, right? But they're not experiencing, or never will they experience, the same oppression, the same racism that a Black man or Black woman is receiving. And so you hit on that, I don't want to erase that. Like, we don't want to erase it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to bring it up. It has to be a constant conversation that's being talked about. And even when people do use the word of people of color during this actual movement, we actually need to be able to tell them, like, I appreciate you saying people of color, but right now we're talking about Black lives. That's what's happening right now. That is what's being lost. We have to address that.
I'm glad you brought that up because my surge sister, Jana, mentioned that the other day on our Facebook, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true. We're like watering down this issue because there's so many people are uncomfortable of using the word Black, of admitting that this is a Black issue, right? They're like, Black, and then I had to have this conversation with my students because I said something, I think it was last school year, and I said Black people are more likely to be incarcerated for XYZ, right? And like half the students went, oh, Miss Ellie, that's racist. And I was like, why is that racist? And they were like, you said that Black people go to jail more often, you know? And so I had to like turn it into a whole thing, like statistically, you know, justice systems and court judicial systems are, you know what I'm saying? Implicating Black people. So Jana, quoting her, we're talking about Black people right now, not people of color. Susana, I'm a person of color, but I am not more likely to be shot by police officers when driving with a broken headlight. It's not a people of color issue. It's a Black issue. What we're addressing right now is a Black issue. Thank you for bringing that up because that's been on my mind as well.
And I'm even like focusing on my own language and how do we utilize language, right, to perpetuate some of these systems and white dominant culture. And I'm going to say, like, it is an issue that's perpetrated onto Black people. It is not a Black issue. This is a universal issue that we have to address as a community on behalf and in support of Black folks and that. And, you know, and so I told this, I said this to Susana, and I'm working on it. You know, like this is a daily practice. And how do we, one, decenter whiteness in all of our conversations? Two, like, how do we look and address how we continue to perpetuate white supremacist culture? And, you know, it's everywhere. We live in it. We swim in it. We all can perpetrate it. But yeah, no, I think that language is so important here, and not erasing and not softening. I've been talking about right to comfort for the last 2 weeks, and right to comfort is a white dominant cultural norm, right? It's a white supremacist norm. And I'm gonna go off into a little spiel here. This is not what I planned, but here we go. So on Facebook, I am tired of navigating and educating people about how they're sounding racist or being racist, or, you know, navigating through their own stereotypes and whatever. And so Laura and I, my fiance, soon to be my wife, got into a nice little argument yesterday because there was some guy who went on somebody's Facebook and started just spewing some stuff. And, you know, and there was like 5 or 6 people who were like trying to walk him through that process of like, this is why, you know, you might consider saying something differently, da. And so I just finally posted, yo, bro, you're racist. Have a good day. And like calling it out versus like trying to navigate this stuff. you know, I think that to me is where I'm at in my stage. Now, I could be wrong. I create the space for where I'm wrong in this stuff, but the more that we allow this stuff to hold space in our lives and for us not to call it and check it out at that point, the more that people think it's acceptable to continue doing that behavior. And so language is so powerful there. And so anyways, I appreciate you sharing that and engaging in that conversation. I'm going to ask you this then, from a hope perspective. COVID-19, the current situation in our country, what do you see, if anything, that is hopeful at the moment?
A lot. And I say that because I know there are a lot of negative outlooks on the riots and the looting, but let's look at the bigger picture of how many protests are happening in so many different states. Like, let's just take like a moment to actually, it really gives me, I'm really like a little shaky right now because it gives me chills that it's happening everywhere. Like, this is happening worldwide. Like, this is happening not just in the US, but in other countries, that people are marching and protesting for Black Lives Matter. I don't care how many people you're telling me that are fake, who aren't with it. They're just, with the trend. Just look at that. I am hopeful. I'm a big, and I don't know if it comes from just the personality that I've been gifted with and the positive upbringing that I've had, or it could just be like all the animes I watch. I'm a big anime fanatic, and I don't mean to bring that into play right now, but in a lot of these animes, they go through trials and tribulations, and most of the time there's this good outcome. I truly believe that change is going to happen. What I mean by change, this system is going to be dismantled. Now, it might not happen this year, right? But what's happening right now is going to be the spark and the foundation for what's to come, right? I truly do believe that more people will be held accountable for their actions, not only police, but people such as that guy who was on Facebook being racist, right? Now, do I feel like there's still going to be racist people in the world? Are people still going to commit actions against a certain race? I do believe that that's going to happen. I do. But I feel like now it is being put on blast. Everything is coming out. I mean, everything from the anti-Blackness and white culture to every culture, right? This is on the plate. People are acknowledging these issues, and it's like, yo, what's up? Like, this needs to change. And so I think right now, like we're all talking about, is that people are uncomfortable because for years and years, they've just been doing this thing that nobody's called them out on. And once you're comfortable and content with doing something and somebody calls you out on it, you get mad. You're like, no, that's not wrong, because I have like 15 other people who never said it was wrong before. But now you got you, 20 people over there, these 100 of people back there that are actually telling you like, no, that's actually wrong, right? So I don't have like a specific image that I can describe because I'm a very descriptive person when it comes to seeing things in the future. But I just truly believe what is happening right now is going to change the world. Like everybody's saying with COVID, this is going to change the world. COVID is changing it in not the most positive way, because I feel like the interactions with kids and hugs and building relationships and conversations is going to affect us, like these youth growing up. But this movement right here is going to literally have an impact that is going to be in the history books that people will talk about forever.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's heavy stuff, but I'm glad that you're engaging in the dialogue and the conversation. And I'm hoping that our viewers are also engaging and receiving this information, because it's so important to speak on it and to talk about it. So thank you for that. Susana, you're looking back now. Now you're back. So as we arrive at another end of Ask an Educator, Susana, get the last word.
It's just such heavy stuff to end off on, because Alfredo, I appreciate your hopefulness for sure. Things just seem so murky right now, and more than anything, I appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity today with us, because Edgar and I have had the conversation, like you said, about us taking the lead and addressing anti-Blackness in our community. And you've helped us start those conversations today. And that takes a lot, it takes a lot from you and a lot of energy. And so we extend our arms out to you, and we appreciate your vulnerability in the last hour, but not more than anything, also the passion that you have for your kids. I mean, I was excited when I was listening to you talk. I'm always excited to hear that people's kids are being served well. That's very exciting for me. So I appreciate you and all the work that you do. And it sounds like all the work that Kip Corazon is doing. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's my spiel.
Alfredo, thank you so much for joining us today on Ask an Educator. We are so grateful for your time. LEC community, thanks for joining us too and engaging in the dialogue. You know where we are, you know how we show up, you know how we're doing. So continue to engage with us, and we'd love to hear from you as well. So everybody, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.